just set up some technical issues, but in the interim, I think I'll just get the other members to quickly introduce themselves before I tell you about what our agenda is going to be like. So, Rowan?
Thank you, Shobana. I'm Rowan Joseph. I'm a South African patent attorney. My practice is split between litigation, primarily patent and related litigation, and also prosecution and drafting of patent applications. My practice focuses on life sciences, and I have an interest in the growing sphere and influence of artificial intelligence as it applies to life sciences.
My name is Anvita Bajpayee. I'm founder of Sunvai. Sunvai is a legal tech company, so we build software, and Sunvai is an AI-based platform that enables people with complaints for their resolution. So that's the one-line statement about Sunvai. I come from the tech background, and so I'm the AI side of the IP. So I'll focus more on the AI. Sunvai honi chahiye. Yes, yeah. And prior to founding Sunvai, I have worked with a couple of other startups as well. I have headed their product development group. And I have also have about 14 plus years of experience with corporates like Oracle, Satyam, Wipro. I also own a couple of patents, authored books, research papers, and so that's pretty much about me.
Thank you, Anvita. I'm Rajiv Bhatnagar. I work as a technical person in the full-service IP law firm of Anand & Anand. And I've been involved in trying to bring in AI into deployment inside the organization, and that's what makes it interesting for me here. Thank you.
I know we have Sumir Rayas here from Docera. Actually, he's got a very interesting job title. It's called Solutions Architect, and you can see he's providing solutions for me now, but we'll let him introduce himself in a few minutes. While Samir is providing us solutions there, let me just explain the kind of agenda that we're going to go through. First of all, we're going to deal with some of the basic questions, such as what is AI, etc., since we've got a wonderful panel. I appreciate that we've had 2.5 days dealing with AI and IP. So we're trying to look at some of the lacunas that have been missed out, or maybe to be expanded even more. But so in this section, we're just trying to make sure that we can address some of those issues. And our session is obviously labeled AI Meets IP, leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve IP discovery and monitoring. Before I do that, I think one of the things we know about is the World Intellectual Property Office. You've heard that the World Intellectual Property, WIPO, did their paper on technology trends in 2019, and we've heard several speakers, including Sir Partha Sarathi yesterday, talking about the paper and some of the statistics in it. But following on from that, in December, 13th December, there was a further consultation that's been put out by WIPO based on draft issues done by the Secretariat on intellectual property policy and artificial intelligence. Now, I hope all of you are aware of that. I'm sure most of you are. But the consultation is open until wonderful Valentine's Day, so until the 14th of February, and there are quite a few eminent issues with regard to IP and artificial intelligence, which might be of very benefit to you. Now, let me just introduce you. Let Samir introduce himself first.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Shobana. My name is Sumair Riaz. I have been with Dolce for about 9 years now. My initial work was around analytics on the patent spot, and that was very interesting for me, and I continued working in that space. And then I graduated to a slightly more business role where I work with clients to provide solutions, and now I'm responsible for our business across Europe, India, and the Central Asia part. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. Now, we know very well this is a Friday afternoon. You've just had a wonderful lunch, and so we want to keep you entertained. So if you could all get involved in the discussion, we'd like to have more audience involvement. So if you log on to www.slido.com and put that code GIPC 2020, you'll be able to ask questions, and we will try and put that poll up in due course. Not yet. You can leave the other presentation. If you do that, you can ask questions, and there will be a couple of polls that we will be holding as well. So we'd like to have more kind of client engagement, audience engagement in this. So I think I'm going to just start off. As I said, the session is going to be dealt in 3 parts. One is just going to be a general AI, and just put a grounding on what is AI at the moment and where we are in the present timeline. And secondly, then we're going to look at practical applications in the legal sector, and then specifically in IP. And then followed by that, we're going to look at some of the challenges and practical concerns that are available, and some practical solutions as well. So I'm going to now put the floor off through to Anvitha, who will describe and mention certain parts on clarifying to us what is AI.
So, if you look at this picture, all of you understand what it is, right? But if I ask you that, give me rules, how I can define this picture if I'm writing a computer program, right? So typically, traditionally, the computer programs used to be, for example, if I'm writing a software for banking. So I would say, okay, my banking operations provide, say, 3 features, say credit, debit, and maybe loan, and then I define rules for that. So if this is a percentage of loan, this is a duration, and so on. So I very well articulate, and then it has to be coded. So rules are defined. Now, when you talk about any real-world data, say take banking in today's scenario, when we do online transactions. And in online transactions, again, if you are, say, making any online purchase, say for 50,000 rupees, and how should online, whatever banking, authorize your transaction? Are you a fraudulent person? Is the transaction genuine or not? So how should I identify that? On the internet, nobody can see anybody, right? So if you talk about this kind of scenario, how do I authorize? It's basically some kind of pattern that has to be understood. So we cannot define rule. We cannot say, okay, if it takes 2 seconds, then authorize. If it takes 5 seconds, then the person is fraudulent, and so on. So there are no rules that can be defined. So in this kind of picture also, you cannot say white is this, right? So there's no rule to define white. There's no rule to define, okay, if it's a solar panel, then there should be lines with this width, this length, this color. If you say white, means how white? So for example, if this chair, you look at white, then again you see the cover on the table. So again, you see the difference. So we cannot define rules for capturing any real life data. And the minute we write program with this kind of variability in data, real life data, then it becomes machine learning, AI, or any of those terms that you hear, pattern recognition. Because we are learning from data, we understand data, but we cannot write rules to define the data. So that's pretty much about AI. And in case of AI, and why it is important, because this is the world we live in. This is what happens on internet in 1 second. This is last year's data, and obviously every year it increases. If I go 2 years back, so if you see 2017 and 2018, just look at data related to Netflix and Instagram, you see the progress happened like 4 times almost. So this is the volume of data that we talk about. And obviously it's very difficult to define rules in real life data. You talk about, okay, Amazon people are buying things, how do you understand their preferences, how do you recommend things to them to make any kind of further sales. So we need to understand their preferences, their choices. We cannot say, okay, if person is of this age, he has to be recommended this. We have to understand how users are similar, how their purchase patterns are similar, and so on. So if we talk about these kind of scenarios, then obviously we need to come up with algorithms related to AI and machine learning. And then again, this is another important parameter. If you talk about number of devices, so you see the growth. And it's predicted that by 2025, you can see numbers, how it is growing. So approximately 34 billion connected devices will be there, right? And some of them will be sensor-based, and rest, which are not in red color, they are like software, purely software data that we share. We log into Facebook, we create our profiles, we make transactions online. So some of these...
the population is 7 billion, so 35 billion.
Yes.
5 times.
Yes. Yes.
1:5.
Yes. Yes. So obviously we cannot avoid. So if we say, is AI optional, can we do without it? Probably not. But at the same time, we have to also understand how and why we have to handle it, right? So that's pretty much about AI. Sumer, how do I play the video? So just to detail on this thought, I'll just play a 1-minute video. This is not a very formal video. This comes from a WhatsApp forward, but it's very relevant. So. And there are some text written in a language which I don't understand. So.
Playing jazz.
Smoothie.
Making smoothie.
Calendar.
No meetings today. Remember, tandleke at 9:30.
Fire off.
Fire off.
Open door.
Door open. Så ska vi sätta en till.
Fire. Open door.
Run voice command.
Open door.
Run voice command.
Open. Open door.
Repeat back.
Open door.
I didn't understand that.
Hey! Open door!
Play on the floor.
Get on the floor! Open the door!
Wrong
Open the door!
Error.
Hey, what a rock! Open door.
Higher volume.
Playing jazz.
Playing jazz.
Smoothie.
Making smoothie.
Calendar.
Yeah. So any comments on this? So basically what happened, what you saw in video, when we model a voice, so typically the way we record voice in phone or any of the devices, the way voice is modeled, that starting from the lips to lung, this is called the vocal tract system of humans. So when you record voice, these characteristics are captured. So if there's any change in the vocal tract system, the data change, right? So the model will not be able to recognize. So after the person goes through the dental surgery, so basically his vocal tract system changed, and the model is not able to recognize. So basically it's a different voice at that point of time. So that is where we are. So basically when we train the model on any particular data is very, very important, model is very, very important, but at the same time we also have to understand where and how and why they will fail. And that is when we talk about multi-model systems. So if one algorithm doesn't work or one set of data is likely to be corrupted, then what is the other set of data that we have to use? Is there a backup in case of, say, fingerprint technology, if I have to enable a system in this kind of scenario? Or can I capture any other system, any other parameter of the voice of human being to create? So basically, today when we have systems, some of these systems, yes. So basically, this is where we are right now. We have all these independent components. We see a lot of things are happening, and a lot of things are also happening at a research level, where we have come up with very sophisticated, very promising results. But at the same time, when we talk about system building, obviously we have all these disconnected components. They have to be plugged together, and sharing of data is very, very important. We have to come up with policies like how do we enable sharing and also divide commercials, understand contribution of various stakeholders in this scenario. So that's pretty much about AI. Yeah, and then we'll take questions over Slido to discuss more into this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anvita. Now, just sit up here. So with regard to AI, I think another thing that I really wanted to get cleared, to just get present, is the fact that there is, AI can be also based with regard to length, strength, breadth, or application. And I know if you look at the WIPO paper, the one on trends in technology trends, they clarify that there can be two categories with regard to both applications, functional applications, and the technology. But I think what we need to be present with at the moment is that we're still in that regime, that timeline of what we'd call weak or narrow artificial intelligence. Everything from your voice recognition system, your Google Maps, automated cars, and even Sophia. I don't know if you've seen Sophia Awakens on YouTube, where there is this robot that has been made and actually got a passport to Saudi Arabia. Even those programming, because the programming is done on specific programs and it's learned it through those programs, but cannot actually interact itself on something new, it's still within that range of narrow or weak artificial intelligence. We're looking at also what we call the strong AI or generalized AI. And this is where the AI can actually interact and operate on a wide variety of independent and unrelated tasks. And that's when it can learn to solve problems. And this is when it can actually resolve and solve problems by itself, equivalent to that of a human being. Nick, and this is where most of the science fiction films all come from, in that range. You probably heard of kind of remarks like this from Nick Bostrom, who's a professor at Oxford University, that claims and made comments such as artificial intelligence, we're like children playing with a bomb, and therefore we need to really consider about the ethics and the way that things are dealt with. I think in one of his TED Talks, he explains that we are likely to get into that regime of general artificial intelligence by around, I think we've got 50% probability from his data AI experts, 50% probability of getting into that regime of general AI. The super AI, where it is equivalent to be the same consciousness of a human being, that is very unlikely to be available at present. There's also, of course, these comments by Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and even Bill Gates at a recent keynote speech that mentioned that its AI is like nuclear energy, both promising and dangerous. So it really depends on how we actually develop it and deal with it now in applications. So I'll move on to the second section of our session, and that is about how artificial intelligence is being used in the legal sector. Now, I'm just going to give you a quick general overview. The overview is things like it's being used in e-discovery and predictive coding, which I shall just go through a bit more further in terms of how it's been used in 2 cases in the UK to deal with the discovery stage in the litigation part to improve efficiency. But of course, we've got information discovery, where we've got patent and trademark searches, data mining and verification. We've got matter analysis, and I know very well my panel will be talking further on these sections, particularly with implications to the AI, the intellectual property sector. We have also document automation and security. You've heard certain bits on contract management and case management. I think one of our speakers mentioned about Specifico, the way that it can specifically make patent applications for technology. And of course, concerns with regard to blockchain would be there, to add those on to improve security with those areas. There's provisions of dynamic self-service regulatory and legal online services. Certain decision trees could actually be more effective with artificial intelligence, case management, and obviously self-service compliance issues, etc. As I said, I'll just quickly talk about predictive coding in terms of litigation matters. This is where, of course, particularly in the UK civil procedure rules, is that any party to a case has to disclose to the other party all relevant materials, whether it's in favour of their case or not. And of course, this usually takes, if it's a massive case, like in Pyro, it would have taken several months with a huge number of lawyers to be involved in order to go through all the documents and find out which was relevant, which was irrelevant, which was whether it's protected by legal professional privilege or not, and what was agreed for in Pyro Investments and MWB Property was that both parties agreed that predictive coding was the best way forward. What was more efficient and more concerning, of course, was when in David Brown versus BCA Trading Limited and others, that was an unfair prejudice case where a minority shareholder was taking an action against the majority shareholders for being unprejudicial and of the share valuation. And even though it was contested as to the use of predictive coding, the court actually, the Chancery Division actually agreed that predictive coding was the most productive way forward. And how it usually works, just to do it in basic forms, is that usually a lawyer would look at a seed set of data, a seed set of documents. That would be either doing it generally by just taking it just randomly and looking at those documents, or it could be done with a hybrid approach, meaning that you use keynote searches as well and deal with that. Then the senior lawyer trains the algorithm, and after a certain set of training, it looks for validity and quality checking on those. So that's how it goes in terms of predictive coding. And it's found that it's very beneficial because it saves a lot of time. Of course, there are questions which we will be considering about later on about the consequences of this probably in the future in terms of how do we deal with training for our younger trainees, because most of my colleagues who would be trainee solicitors would probably have done would have been going through all those documents to search which is irrelevant and relevant documents, and whether it's legal protected by legal professional privilege or not. Those sort of things now, I think the training would have to be very different. So I'm going to leave it here now and actually let Rowan come and discuss about how it actually impacts in the IP sector.
Thank you, Shabana. I'm amazed at the technical proficiency of my colleagues. So what I want to focus on is just simply practically how AI applies to IP at present. And maybe after that, as part of the panel discussion, we can thrash out maybe where it's going. But it is being used in intellectual property. And just looking at some of the ways it's been used by the profession at the moment. In the EPO, they have a device or a tool which is used for classification and prior art searches. So when new applications come into the EPO, they are automatically pre-classified and then assigned to the correct unit. They also use artificial intelligence to perform automatic searches on the incoming results, which I'm guessed give the examiners a good basis for further diving into the searches that they perform. You have a tool called Innovation Q, which understands two terms, for example, that car and vehicle are the same or have a similar meaning, but also understands that a word like stream can have multiple meanings. It could be streaming data, a stream that's running through a field, etc. So what this tool enables is the use of ordinary language to retrieve documents containing similar concepts or meanings. So it's using artificial intelligence to simplify and get more accurate search results. Then in the field of document automation, we have something called Turbo Patent, which apparently automatically generates patent specifications based on invention disclosures. Thank you. And it also predicts the possible grounds of rejection and art units to which the application can be assigned. And a related product then called Smart Shell generates draft responses to office actions and can generate legal and technical arguments in response to examiner objections. So clearly that, for the patent attorneys among us, becomes an important tool or a threat to us, depending how you're looking at it. The EPO is also using artificial intelligence-powered machines for translations of patent documents, including prior art documents, patent office work products, etc. I've certainly noticed that the translations provided by the EPO for foreign documents are at a stage where they're almost usable as such, and that it's no longer required to actually get the services of a translator when you need to have a document translated just to peruse it. So it's certainly having a direct effect on my practice at least, and I'm sure your practices as well. Then as it pertains not to the IP profession, but more to our clients and those of you in creation of intellectual property, I think the best known examples for the use of AI is in drug discovery, where AI tools are used for enabling fast and efficient processes in what is known as intelligent drug design. So these would be used to recognize drug targets, design effective drugs around them, and also used for compound discovery and identifying screening molecules. So whereas I think the process has for the last few decades at least been to a large extent computer-driven, AI is now improving on that process and taking it the extra steps further. So it's reported that drug discovery held over 35% of global artificial intelligence market in 2016, and its market share will grow to $4 billion in 2024. So that's a compounded annual growth rate of more than 40% for the use of AI in drug discovery. But it's not only used in drug discovery, it's also used in other areas, and I'm just going to look at 3 case examples. So one will be perfumery, another would be creation of literary and artistic works, and the other is the Dabus system. And I think you've probably all kind of heard of the Dabus results or the system by now. So in perfumery, apparently it takes perfumers many years to develop the ability to craft a fragrance. And recently a group of IBM researchers and perfumers at Symrise developed this product called Falera, which is an AI-based product which looks at product composition systems and can learn about new formulas, raw materials, historical successes, etc. And it uses AI to work through hundreds of thousands of formulas and thousands of raw materials to identify patterns and novel combinations. It then can detect gaps in the global fragrance market, for which it can then design entirely new fragrance formulas. And it so far has developed 2 new fragrances that are going to be exploited commercially. I think it remains to be seen whether they'll be successful, but certainly that's one application that's going to take away probably quite a few jobs that were previously thought to be untouchable. I think the olfactory sense is something quite unique, and it would always probably have been considered to be quite unique to humans and animals, and the creative ability of that is now being superseded apparently by AI, or possibly. Then we also have it being used in the reconstruction of unseen artworks. For example, the image that you see on the screen is Picasso's old guitarist that has the presence of a ghostly woman's face faintly visible in the painting itself. So this was known for quite some time. In 1998, conservators photographed using X-rays and infrared light to see what lies behind the surface. And they saw that the images depicted a seated woman holding out her left arm. But it's only recently that researchers at the University College of London have been able to use a machine vision technique to retrieve the lost Picasso painting and render it in color in the first time. And that's what they found. And then the third study that I alluded to earlier is this Dabus system. So whereas I think, for me, I've considered AI in a sense just a tool, like we've always been using tools, microscopes, for example, or CAD programs, or software modeling for stress analysis of structures or engines, etc. We've always used that and we've accepted that. And to me, AI seems almost just a normal, another extension of that. I think something like the Dabus system is putting it just a little step further. So what Dabus does is it generates new ideas by varying connections of the interconnecting neural networks. And then a second layer of networks detects the consequences of these ideas. So unlike other AI implementations or just normal software that we use in designing and in product development, Dabus is not trained to solve any particular problems. Instead, it seeks to develop and devise new ideas. So it's almost, as Shobana related to becoming, I wouldn't say self-conscious, but it's now thinking on its own and it's not been asked to do anything. And it was recently listed as the inventor on 2 UK patent applications. And the first was for a food container that uses what they call fractal design to create pits and bulges in the side of the container, which assist in packing and interlocking the containers, and also in the handling during production by robotic arms, etc. And the second one, an irritating one, it provides a lamp which is difficult to ignore because it's designed to flicker on a rhythm which mimics patterns of neural activity that accompany the formation of ideas in the human brain. So I'm not sure exactly what the light would be used for, but maybe an alarm, especially maybe in an aircraft where it's essential that it be seen. And they filed patent applications for these, but they've been subsequently rejected by the EPO on the basis that the inventor is not a human. So yeah, we start bumping up against this inventorship issue, and I'm not sure how you resolve that one. We also use AI in patent monitoring. It's primarily limited to monitoring, at this stage, trademarks and copyright infringements. 2 examples are IP Hawk. This is a Mumbai-based company which monitors the internet looking for brand owners, trademarks, content, and other IP. So the algorithm scrapes common venues of infringement and then collects the related data. Then in a second process where there are detections of the trademark, an AI algorithm determines if the use is legitimate or not. And it uses numerous metadata signals such as the reputation and history of the publisher to discern between legitimate and illegitimate use. And then where it detects illegitimate use, it's also got a legal response engine which helps the aggrieved brand owner to then take some action, whether it be a takedown notice, a cease and desist letter, etc. So again, it's taking a lot of the, well, some of the services that would typically be provided by firms in the IP community, and now putting that on a platform which is going to be very probably simple to use and provide speedy results. Another one is called Trademark Now, and it replaces manual searching by providing name and image trademark search watches and analysis. Then they use AI to handle real-world complexities such as the likelihood of confusion analysis, and it also sends software alerts on potentially infringing trademark applications as it happens. And this product covers 180 countries' trademark registries, as well as common law data sources. So again, making inroads into typically IP profession services. So in conclusion, we've seen that it's already having AI is already having a profound impact on the intellectual property profession. It's also being used in the creation and discovery, so on both sides of the IP, if you could call it fence, the profession side and the discovery and development side, with implications as to IP ownership being hotly debated within the IP community. It's a hot topic. I don't think anybody knows the answer except that the laws need to change, and they need to change universally for there to be any relevance to them. And when I say universally, I mean it's going to take probably another, for me, Paris Convention or international treaty to accept that a machine can be an inventor if that's in fact the way we need to go. I'm not sure that we do need to go that way at all. AI-based monitoring tools exist which automatically warn of trademark infringements and generate appropriate documents, and there seem to be room for patent-specific tools in this nature. With rapid advances being made in natural language processing, we should see the development or the ability to develop such tools. And then I think as we travel further into the age of implementation, we can expect even more applications and increasing sophistication in IP discovery and monitoring. And with that, I'm not going to say questions, but thank you, and I'll hand over.
Thank you, Rowan. As you said, there's going to be, I'm grateful for the questions that are already on Slido. Keep them coming. We will be dealing with them in due turn. There's also a poll that's been put open as well. And the question in the poll is, AI will require legal professionals to acquire digital coding skills. How many of you agree out of 1 to 10? So try and fill that in if you can, we'll see. And now I'm going to allow Sumir to deal with some more applications-based.
Thank you, Shobana. I have a presentation here I'll use as a placeholder, and just one moment. But it was a very thought-out presentation by Rowan. Interested me personally as well. You know, we started, the initial part of the presentation started off as how AI is a direct application for patent searching part, at least. How many of you here are familiar at least with patent searching, if not a search themselves? So a large number of audience is familiar with patent searching. So in that case, I think this presentation might actually be a good application of how AI and machine learning has had an impact in our profession, at least. I'd start right away. Okay. I work for Dolcera. We, at least those of you who are in the patent searching business would probably know about us. We have been in business for about 16, 17 years in the area of patent searching and analysis. But what we are talking about today is slightly more different and difficult than searching itself. So it requires a lot of effort that we had to put into place in the areas of, say, data warehousing, software, and data science itself. So it requires a lot more effort than just knowing pattern searching and just knowing AI. Now, some credibilities that we've received, we just very recently won the first position at the USPTO that was organized by the White House and the Vice President. We helped the White House understand the reasoning and the rationale behind funding behind cancer in the US. We're present outside of India as well, but that's something that you may know about us or not. Today we are talking about AI in action. So I want to sort of start with what we've been doing in the area of pattern searching generally as searchers, and what are the challenges, what are the unmet needs people have had in our profession, and can AI and how help in solving some of these challenges? Can it help us become more efficient? That's sort of what I want to talk about. Now, don't think of AI as something that is here to sort of take your jobs. Imagine 30, 40 years back when pattern searching was a manual, physical effort, right? People had to go to patent offices or libraries to go and physically get a copy of a patent, read it and understand, and then maybe interpret what is written, go to the court to sort of defend your client, and so on and so forth. So it was also a generation, people have worked there, when they got sort of introduced to a system where things would start getting online, right? So you would have tools at that time, IBM Delphian was one of the very earlier tools, sort of disrupted people who were working in libraries. They thought their work is done here, right? So a librarian would obviously feel when an online tool is introduced that, what am I going to do next? But still, to this date, there are libraries in a different fashion. There are libraries online and physical, they exist, right? So we had the first initial searching disruption where people were able to search online instead of having to travel and go to the physical patent offices. Going forward from there, you started having advanced searching techniques. You use Boolean operators to combine various concepts. So because when patents grew in number, not only were you looking for a patent for wind energy, but you were also looking for patent for wind energy using a turbine of a certain frequency, right? So it started increasing in complexity. The number of patents were more, therefore you actually required Boolean operations and restrictions on search database itself to be able to actually do your job. Otherwise, sifting through thousands of documents of wind energy, trying to find one patent about a certain turbine of a certain frequency or something like that would take you hours. So for example, in this case, this was a boon, right? And technology gotten further into the picture. Now you not only do that, you perform analytics over and above patents. I mean, we've all seen that, we think this is useful, right? Until this moment on, whoever patent searchers think whatever analytics we perform are actually very useful in helping us understand what patents there are and how to find them more efficiently, right? So that's where we are right now. And the next step, obviously, is advanced analytics. You use a lot of concepts from machine learning and AI to be able to use disclosures in the patents to understand them better, to find them quickly, and to sort of create reports that can be used very efficiently. So pre, post searching operations you were performing 10 years back manually are sort of automated one by one. So that's how you should see AI as well, right? That 5 years back, what you were doing and you thought might not work, did actually work for you and it's not just that. I mean, the quantum of patents, and I'll take that as a second step. The quantum of the patents itself is so large that manually doing everything might not be such a good idea, right? So, see this as a transition or an evolution of how you would upskill yourself to be able to do your job much better and contribute overall. Now, this is one of the challenges. This is a slide talking about some of the challenges that I initially talked about, and we did a poll in our company with our own searchers and with the people who we work with globally. Overall, the challenges that people definitely face in the area of patent searching is, the first thing is quantum of information, quantum of relational information. I mean, it's not just the number of patents are too many, right? So we have about more than 100 million patent documents, more than 10 million assignees, actually 50 million, 50 million inventors, and hundreds of millions of technical concepts written in patents. Now, that is the quantum of information. The challenge, however, is the relational intricacies between these parameters, meaning there are 100 million patents that are owned by 10 million assignees. Already you have one function that there is an overlap. Some assignees own a lot of patents, some own less. There are more than 100 million concepts written in patents, which means some patents talk about some concepts, others talk about other concepts. So there is so many sort of Venn diagrams over here that like manually doing a lot of all of this is a slightly difficult job, right? So that's where to automate, and with the help of AI, which is a self-learning program or an application, can help, for example, design data sets in a much better fashion, read better from patents, and so on and so forth. So it's not just the challenge with the quantum, it's just the challenge with what is written in the patents is also to be interpreted, and the relational information between assignees and concepts and patents and geographies and sort of all of that poses a larger challenge than just the quantum. Mapping patents obviously to disclosures, right? What is written in the patents might not always be what it is relevant for. I mean, all of you are lawyers, you always don't talk very straight. I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer, but what I'm trying to say is the way patents are drafted is a complex job, right? It's a complex job. Let's put it that way, it's a complex job. I don't want to say anything else, but the way it's written is not the way it's interpreted. There are many things written they don't mean in patents. I mean, people who have patents here, when they read their patents and they go back to their lab notebook, what? Did I do that? Right? So mapping patents to the actual disclosures is also a problem, right? And then, non-patent information. So people also find it challenging, because what do you do with patents? At the end of the day, you have to justify what you do with patents is to either market products, is to end up at a marketplace, you become useful. So there are regulatory informations, there are scientific informations you have to sort of harmonize with. So that is also a challenge to sort of do manually, and AI can help. So for example, there are dictionaries and thesauri that understand concepts and can map them to concepts in the patents, and you can understand, okay, there have been 10,000 scientific papers written about a certain technology and only 8,000 patents. Or are we, sort of tells you where we are at the discovery phase of a certain technology. And then, legal status harmony, that's a challenge. I wish, I would know more about it, but the last slide that Anvita shared with us had so many tangles of many sorts, right? So that's the story with, that's a very practical application. She talked about it from a theoretical perspective, but it's a very practical application of such a thing in the legal status. So there are, I don't know, more than 100, legal authorities or jurisdictions, and even the same document or even the same patent would have patent sort of families in all these countries have a different legal status, right? All of you who are patent searchers would understand. So there is complexities there. So you would see how from a more conceptual perspective to a application perspective, you're able to see how that makes sense. And what has been done then, right? So we talk about challenges. Where does AI actually come into picture? What has AI done, or at least what have we done in our company to be able to sort of innovate in the area of searching and analytics on patterns? So first thing is to empower users to ask the right questions. Every database will give you answers, but your answers are only as good as the questions you ask, right? So can you enable a user to be able to ask the questions in a much more efficient fashion? So make use of various thesauri and dictionaries in the form of, in our tool, for example, semantics and synonyms, to ask the right question. So an example, take a look at this slide, and yeah, so a search for artificial intelligence as a concept. The tool itself will help you understand the various ways an artificial intelligence concept can be referred as. Rowan also mentioned, about a tool innovation queue as to how they're able to map and understand and sort of like interpret that the word car and the word vehicle has similar meanings. The complexity, however, then arises when the word vehicle is also used in automotive industries. So there is a lot of complexities around here as well, and I would also touch upon that in the next, in this slide itself. So here's how the system can help you understand as to what you should search for, and not as a user have you bang your head to arrive at such terms. Map pattern disclosures is the second thing I was talking about, right? So what is written in the patterns, at the end of the day, you perform a pattern search, you get some results. Will you read all of them? Sure you can, but will your boss be very happy you reading all the patterns at the end of the day, you telling him an answer as simple as there are no such patterns, right? So mapping what is written in the patterns, at least as a first phase with the help of AI, is something that is very viable. So the same search we performed about artificial intelligence-based patterns would help us understand the various concepts written in these patterns. For example, what are the patterns talking about supervised learning? You go directly to those documents without having to discover them manually yourself. What are the documents talking about artificial neural networks? So the first pass of this sort of discovery that you were otherwise doing manually is getting done, with the help of the machine. Then assign normalization. This is a problem for a lot of corporates, specifically more than others, is the ownership of the data. So AI obviously will help understand how various subsidiaries of a certain company can map to a legal parent, right? Talking about, for example, lexical disambiguation is the same thing I talked about just a while earlier, vehicle. Yeah? The example I have taken here is tablet, which means tablet can be used, for example, in a more traditional pharmaceutical industry, also in the information sciences industry, also in the electronics industry, right? So how do you, when you search for a certain term as this, or as vehicle, or as suspension, or something like that, you are in a fix, or the system is in a fix to help itself understand as to what the question is actually. It will throw you all the patterns, and many searchers here would use class codes and so on and so forth to be able to filter data, yet is time taking. So the system, at least what I was going to show was how this lexical disambiguation can be overcome by AI to help get the context of what you are trying to search for. If I have a minute, maybe I will spend a minute on this if we have time to show actually this in action. Then you can also understand other such aspects like tag documents along to their importance. For example, documents which are sort of FDA important. Yeah, so you're borrowing information from somewhere else and giving it in the shape that can actually help you perform your job much faster. You can get updates and alerts, like you can get answers which are much more defined for your business, right? So instead of having you to read all the documents every time, every week for a certain technology, you can perform the filters, or you can perform an operation with the help of AI where specific questions. I only want to understand new companies when they enter my area. I only want to understand, grants when they happen in my area. Initially, or like years back, a couple years back, not years back, a couple years back, people used to read all the documents that were filed in their area and then interpret these things manually. Whereas now, with tools like PCS, you can do that online and with much ease, right? And all of this, obviously, because computer programs have grown in stature, you can do a lot of that in a much easier user interface. How are we doing on time? So if we have 30 seconds, I was quickly going to show that in action if people are interested as well about the lexical disambiguation. Is that okay? The panelists are okay? No, then. Okay. Now, this is an important part as well. So reliability of AI tools. You should question, obviously, yourself as to why and how should you rely on a tool, right? And this has been our talk as well since yesterday about how do we justify what we are doing with the help of AI, and should we actually go and sort of like invest in our time and effort and our company's money into such tools. So the first thing that a lot of people have had questions about is AI being a black box, right? We don't know what happens, therefore we cannot rely on it. Fair, judgment, but that's how you evaluate a tool, right? So if your tool is able to tell you exactly how it searched for and what concepts it took into consideration to be able to give you your result, is a very important way to evaluate, right? So there are obviously tools available that will give you a result set. So for example, you search for a technology, you have an invention disclosure, you get results, right? You get some results, some of them are highly on target results, and you're happy, right? Sometimes though, they don't give you highly on target results. In such a case, your manager will come and say, hey, are you sure there are no such patterns? You're not sure because you don't even know what the system did, right? You're not sure because even the system wouldn't tell you how it arrived at that results, right? So that's where, as a human, your effort to sort of push people to get answers in the direction of how you want. So can your tool tell you, or can you push your vendor to ask and say, hey, I arrived at these 10 results, is that all? Or what were the parameters that you as a tool took into consideration to get this result set? So that's a very rational and a very fair way of asking because you're paying for, you have to understand what I pay for, I should get what I want, right? So, so the black box approach can be obviously overcome by helping sift through as to what is actually a black box, which is, yes, the case in many times, in many cases, but of course there are ways to sort of like, demystifying as to what a good technology is versus what a bad one is. The data behind. So the most important part, and maybe Anvita would have been a better proponent of this, is the fact that, and this I think is one of the questions as well, is the data behind AI, right? It's only as good as what you teach it, right? So the harmonization and the cleanup of the data is a very important part of the overall process. So if the learning and the training of the system is such that it's reliable, which means you ask yourself or the tool vendor the question, hey, how do you train your data? What were the parameters you took into consideration to be able to normalize and clean up the data? For example, about assignee normalizations. There are so many tools talking about being the best assignee normalization on paper, right? So ask them this question as to how did you arrive at this? What was the cleanup on the assignees? So there is obviously the new patents that were filed under, I don't know, a new name or a subsidiary of a certain company, obviously will get sort of linked to its parent only if the actual data where the mapping was trained on is accurate. So the harmonization of assignees, also the technical concepts as well, is very important. So ask yourself this question as well. Third point being the evaluation of the actual results. So there are two major sort of these parameters people take into consideration, the precision and recall, to understand how accurate and how well the results are. So the precision recall is a measurement of how close you are to the overall set of results. So if there are 100 documents or 100 patterns to do with wind energy and your system is giving you 95, so your recall is 95, right? But oftentimes you can get 105 as well by being broad. I mean, pattern searchers would do this every day where they would put large strings and the recall would go high, right? You end up at 200 documents, but the precision is low, which means only 50% of the results are actually accurate, right? So it's a fine balance of how the system performs on these two parameters, which is the precision and recall. So recall is high, precision gets low. It's the conventional way how things work, right? But that's the way. I mean, no tool is 100% accurate in terms of recall and precision as on date, but where do you want yourself to be? Do you want yourself to be like 100% recall and 70% precision? You're in a much better place. You only have to sift through 30% of the noise in that space. So you ask yourself this question as to what is important for you. Is it important for you to sort of get these 5 results very quickly, and which might not be the 100% of what there is? Then your recall can be less, but your precision is high. And if you're okay with that, I mean, if you're trying to kill the novelty of a document with just one document, you don't care about all the others, then have your system set up on high precision, maybe less recall, right? But if you're trying to understand the overall prior art and state of the art of a certain technology or a certain landscape, your recall has to be high. You want to understand all the documents, and then you can somehow manage with your precision. That's the 3 most important parameters, according to me, to evaluate or rely on IP tools. And that's probably that. I mean, I just at the end have a couple slides to help understand the practical examples of using AI tools. And I have referred to the tool that I have access to, the Dolcera PCS and prior art, the use cases of how you can do that. The first thing is instant pattern landscape reports. You can create very well-advanced pattern landscape reports in a matter of few hours. You used to spend more than tens of thousands of dollars, take several weeks of your time. But if you're talking about being 95% accurate, and anyway, I mean, no manual analysis is 100% accurate, right? You have your day and human biases and so on and so forth. We'll discuss that in the coming minutes. But, considering all of that, it's a much better trade-off to obviously understand you can create such reports in a much better fashion for a pattern landscape. Audit of patent portfolios. You have so many competitors now. You want to understand, because ever-changing patent landscapes or technological landscapes, you want to understand the portfolios much better, right? And the question sometimes you have is, can I quickly understand how many patents in this technology does my competitor have, right? And then obviously the allied area. So such questions can be very well and very quickly answered in a much more efficient fashion as well. Prior art search. This is probably the most telling and the most defining way in which patent search tools have been evaluated, is to get reliable and 100% prior art. So obviously, now here's the thing. So the tools or the algorithms used for prior art are much more sort of different than what people are using, let's say, to create portfolios or landscapes of patents. So you can sort of like save your day or two by just using a pattern search engine, which, again, be aware, ask yourself the question of black box, ask yourself the question of the cleanup, ask yourself the question of the precision and recall, and then use a tool to sort of be more at peace overall for your own self, right? Identifying assets for licensing. This is a very practical application as well. People want to target infringements in the area and potential licensing options by using online tools, because that's the first step. So my first step is to understand who is using this technology, who has patterns like this. A practical application of similarity searches and so on and so forth, right? So identify assets for licensing and obviously monetize your patent portfolio. This is again a practical application of AI and tools that are out there. And that's all from me. Any questions? We'll take that up in the Slido. Keep asking your questions, and at this point in time, I will turn over to Shobana and we'll move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. I think I'm just going to ask the panel now, since we've shifted from applications to also dealing with challenges. If I can ask now the panel, what do you think? Are there any kind of applications, or what are the main challenges that you see in these applications? Would you?
I'd like to touch upon another dimension, if I may, before we get into very specific questions. I wanted to talk about the perspective of us practitioners to AI. I think we've touched upon it in various forums, including the various other discussions that have happened in the conference, and even the title of the conference talking about disruption, terms like disruption, which in one sense might be scary, but at least it raises concerns. And we've also talked a lot about the aspects of AI that could help us do our work. So there are two dimensions. One is, of course, the facilitating dimension. And the other one is the dimension which sort of makes us aware that there are things that we need to do to face up to AI, so to speak. So as a person working in this field, I wanted to raise a few issues and have them addressed by anybody who chooses to. So as a practitioner, there are two sides of the practitioners as well. One, of course, is the man actually doing the work, the employee. And then there's the firm as a whole, which is in the marketplace offering services. And it has competition. And AI is a tool that's being deployed by various people, including competitors. And how do you deal with that? So looking at these two, and also knowing the fact that if there is a competitor or a set of competitors who are deploying AI in a much more productive manner than we can do it for ourselves, it can have a serious impact on our business. And with AI developing so rapidly, we have to take cognizance of that and figure out how to deal with it. Of course, is to join the bandwagon and know how to train ourselves to be able to deploy it just as well or even better so that we are more competitive. How do we do that? As management of a company or as employees who are working in the field and are, in a sense, also competing with other employees in the same field, in other firms, in the same firm, and how do we deal with that? I think that aspect also needs to be looked at as individuals who are in this field. And I noticed that there have been so many applications that are coming up, and I'm sure there are going to be a million more, that this will only get more intensified as time goes on, right? So it's more important for us to deal with it today and to prepare ourselves. So if I look at the general scenario in the world, in the country, for example, unemployment and so forth, and if you look at the root cause, one of the main causes that's behind unemployment is the fact that people in certain fields have not been able to keep up with the times, with the pace of technology, which is in fact accelerating. And AI is definitely one of those front runners where the acceleration is even more rapid than in other fields. One has to take steps early in time in order to stay in the game. So what should one do to prepare for that, especially in the legal field, which has more or less been isolated from technological changes and has been rather slow in adopting technology, but may now have not much of a choice and would have to deploy it. So it is going to be a game changer, maybe even a paradigm shift for people in the legal profession. And that's global legal, not just IP legal. So, but it's a common phenomenon. So one needs to be able to look at it and figure out what can I do, all right? So the other factor which is also coming up and which I think is in India not so well known, but I think is becoming known now, is the fact that IP is not an island. So when you actually go out into the legal field and practice, you find that there is an intersection of IP with other laws. So whether it's competition law, contract law, regulatory stuff that's there. And most of the time when we do our work, whether it's drafting patents or prosecuting patents or even litigating patents, we do them in isolation of or without really being aware of the impact that other laws will have. And only when we are forced to look at them, we find that, oh, things could have been done better. I mean, I know so many cases where when we actually enter litigation and you look at a patent, you look at the way it was prosecuted, and you say it could have been done better. And had it been done better, things would have been much easier at this point of time for the client, for us. It would have been better if those factors had been taken into consideration at an early stage. And that's not normally done, and it's not easy to do because most of us are specialists. So if I am a person prosecuting, I know prosecution well. I don't quite know litigation that well. And if I am a person drafting, I don't know much about litigation and prosecution. But I do know that those are major factors, and they are things for which I'm actually preparing. My output goes as input to those things. So if at an early stage, we could incorporate those parameters, I think AI can step in here and actually play a very pivotal role, because AI, being able to deal with a large amount of data, with a large amount of facts, can incorporate and see the interplay between them at an early stage and help be facilitating in making things better. Those aspects, for example, you look at searching. Now, searching is such a focused area, and I think Sumer went into great depth on the intricacies and the finer points of searching where AI can help. But searching is not a goal in itself. I mean, it's a step for another goal. And there are other parameters and other factors that need to be brought in to actually achieve that final target. And we don't, as searchers perhaps, or even as litigators, look at all those dimensions in the early stage. We face them much later, and when it's not possible to make substantial changes. But if those can factor in early, it would help a lot. It will make life easy for us. So why can't we bring in those aspects? And normal tools that are currently there are too focused. The search tool is focused on searching. It doesn't really care much about other things. There are other tools. So if I have to do a case law interpretation and bring that into my drafting, there's a darts IP that might be doing it in a different kind of search in the litigation space, and here is a search happening in the patent space, but these two have to ultimately merge. And those tools, I don't think yet exist, but would be nice to have them, or to have an entity that could marry all this together, consider everything together, and then bring out something more meaningful. And maybe that's the next step from the narrow AI to, as you said, the more general AI, the more participative one.
Exactly. I think more on a collaborative work of AI.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you talk about technology, AI is not very new. Mr. Iyer also said that he has done his research in one of the panel yesterday. So around many years ago, like more than 30 years ago. So the only reason why it is popular now is because we have compute available, we have internet. So even 15 years ago, when I have done my research at IIT Madras, we didn't have compute available, internet was not so fast, so obviously you could not think of those applications that we can think now. Now, Google is again like 20 years old company, so these are applications of AI that we have used, and everybody is using these applications, Ola, Uber, Google, Facebook, Amazon, so all this we use, right? Now, what is happening in technology space. So let me just talk about the market segment. And here I'm not talking about legal, I'm talking about the social aspect. So there are three markets. One is like high-tech market. That is when Amazon, Ola, Uber, all these examples come in picture. Then comes the emerging market. Emerging market is like when we talk about applications in, say, rural scenario. For example, how do I provide better healthcare or better, say, crop protection or support to farmers in a rural scenario? So that is when those kind of applications, social applications, where electricity itself is not there. How do you talk about any application? And then in between, traditional markets. So traditional markets, say legal sector. Legal sector is not new, that has been well defined, well established sector. And suddenly we say, now you do your things, but you work in a different manner, right? Let me give another example. Say, if we talk about communication, information, understanding of information. So earlier, people used to communicate information by writing on, say, cave walls. Then they started writing on palm leaves. Then came the paper. Then came the computer. Now we have better compute. So the information is constant. Information is not changed. It's just the means that has changed. And now in any traditional sector, when we say, okay, change means you stop today, understand what is to be changed. That is when all these questions come. And obviously those will be the solutions. And these are already in debate even in technical sector. Because today, if you say you download 50 applications on your phone, it obviously takes 3 hours for you to manage them. Nobody has so much of time, right? So now we are thinking, okay, we have done 20 years of journey by using applications which are already in practice, and we are building more and more. Every day so many startups, so many new applications are coming. But then how do we do betterment for humans? Because at the end of it is for humans. So those debates are already in practice, and we have to come up with defining those use cases and also need support. So as a startup, for example, Sunwai is in legal space, and we are a legal tech company. Now, when a lot of things that resonating with similar thoughts, when if I want to do, if I propose to do, many times it just so happens that data is not there, market is not there, people don't understand. So obviously this will happen, but it will take time. But yes, there are the debates happening, and there are also debates happening around limitation of technology, and then because each of the application will have their its own limitation when we say, okay, this is the purpose, but then beyond that, what, right? So that's where I think people are talking about it, and I think more and more collaboration has to happen from technology, people from tech domain, people from specific individual domains, and then also from government and legal space. Yeah.
Rowan, do you want to add anything?
It's a wide-ranging topic, and we've covered a number of areas. I guess it's because I'm in an IP firm that I share Rajiv's concerns, and that's, so how does it affect me? How does it affect my practice? And what's it going to mean for me in 5 or 10 or 20 years' time? And how do we address the ethical and liability concerns? So yes, we're getting in these tools, but I think most countries have bodies controlling legal professionals, whether we in IP or in advocacy, and if our job is being taken over by a tool, how does that tool become controlled? Do we always remain in control of it, and so we're just sitting as the master and we take ultimate responsibility and liability, or can I pass some of that off? And if my tool suddenly decides it needs to market me in a way that's not consistent with the local regulatory authorities' rules, is that my fault because the tool said I should do that and it's not really my... So I think we haven't grappled with those in the profession yet, and because IP is becoming quite commoditized, there's a drive from industry, our clients, understandably, to say, well, you need to reduce costs, and this might be one way, but does it achieve the goals that we have? Does it still mean that I'm 100% liable to my client, or can I palm some liability off now? or can I get the manufacturer of the tool that I'm using, the developer, can I get them to take some responsibility because it was not drafted properly, etc. So I do think there's a whole bunch of questions that do not relate to the technology per se, but are related to the use of it that we need to address, and that are going to be difficult for us to address.
Thank you, Rowan. I just want to inform about, of course, a poll that's going out there on which AI ethical challenge do you consider to be the most difficult to address. And these are the 6 main challenges which were identified by the Alan Turing report, and trying to get on the 6 main harms that can be caused to society. And I've noticed that everybody here looks to be that the winning concern here seems to be privacy. What are your views on the panel, if I can ask?
Maybe I can start with this. I'm a little surprised because non-transparency, unexplainable and unjustifiable outcomes is pretty down there at towards the 27% in the last quadrant of it. Privacy, obviously, everybody's concerned. And also discrimination and bias. Actually, one of the applications of AI, and Anvita will probably confer with this, is that to cut out on human biases and discriminations is one reason why a lot of people also deploy AI. So, and I also want to very quickly build on to what Mr. Bhatnagar was saying about the probable next step here is to integrate most of the these applications into one. Now, there's one very interesting thing with AI, which is that AI is like, it's a very specific algorithm you can create for a specific problem, right? And we are at this stage, even though we've had AI in action for many, many years, we're at this stage where we are able to solve challenges very effectively, but these challenges sort of happen to be specific. And the most obvious next step is to integrate. I mean, being a lead, obviously, Mr. Bhatnagar had that thought as to what is the next step? When do we arrive at a result where the searching part, the drafting part, and maybe even the office action parts can be all integrated, and an AI tool can be made. We are still, I think, at an adoption phase of these individual applications, and the efforts being made at this point in time obviously are in the right direction, and we would very soon have these integrations, and I may also quote market applications, like, for example, Darts IP you mentioned is already also integrated into many patent searching tools. I mean, sort of my competition, but yeah, it's already happening, right? And we will see more of that, right? So yeah, there's more to see as we go along in this area.
Right, thank you for that. I think a major concern with regard to discrimination bias is mainly because with regard to bias and discrimination, I think a couple of the concerns was, of course, that because AI relies on a lot of data provided by society, that they usually might even reproduce or amplify that discrimination that's already placed in society. So that's one of those concerns that had to be addressed, and I think if you want to look at a website called ProPublica, it showed that how the US used an algorithm to deal with challenges to dealing with sentencing for a great discrimination between black and white convicts. and they found that there was major discrimination between black, and that was mainly because of the algorithm. Now, we've finished off this poll, but let's just try and quickly have, if I can request another 10 minutes for regarding the questions that we're going to deal.
After this, we have a group photograph in the other room. So another 2-3 minutes and then. So please join for the group photograph afterwards.
I think I quickly want to deal with some of the questions. So let's have a look at one of the most main questions was, humans become wiser, and the one at the top anyway, is humans become wiser with time and experience, but on the contrary, isn't AI likely to become more and more prejudiced with time? Anybody would like to discuss
Yeah,
that?
so there are a lot of opinions, I would say, because what I have seen that people fear and also welcome AI and machine learning or any kind of advancement in technology. So the way future is going to be, obviously we see all these systems which come out without, sometimes even in beta stage when there's more failure than the success. And then people realize, okay, this is not working, and then obviously there's a pressure on the business who is also offering the solution. And then people look back, introspect, say even privacy, related to privacy, obviously we have heard issues related to that. Then businesses are forced to look back, then society, legal system is forced to look into policies and come up with like related laws, how to handle. So some of these things. So typically, I think the scenario here is, if I just take one example. So for example, if again, I will take this philosophical example. Say in early days, when there were kings and queens, and after that you talk about industrialization. So in those days, if there's a thief, and then if there's a police in those times, they will go probably on horse and so on. Now in modern days, when you have cars, obviously if the thief is going in the car, the police also has to go in the car, right, to catch that thief. Now today also, if we talk about some of these situations, that how AI has to be improved and how do we control the system, how do we enforce the betterment in systems and for society, for humans. Again, right applications in the systems, right solutions, right AI-based solutions in the system will enforce these concepts. And that is when you will see that all these issues will not be there, will not be talking about that.
So, Rowan, quickly, I mean, how would you think that if you're a patent attorney, how can you learn and keep your job more secure and safe?
Yeah, you know, I think there's always going to be a human element involved in interactions and in client interactions. In some instances, clients are just going to want results and it's a numbers game. But in many instances, it's a relationship that matters. Why are you getting the work rather than your competitor? Probably a relationship. So I'm guessing that we need to focus on relationships, maintaining relationships, seeing how we can enhance relationships. And then the related question underneath that is, can an AI practitioner ever become a practitioner? You know, that's going to take some major changes. So I think we'll see firms as they are for the next good few years, because law societies, I think, move slowly. And I don't see how you're going to avoid the liability and ethical issues. So I think you're going to have lawyers in control of AI lawyers. So maybe it's start looking at how do you become in control of an AI lawyer with keeping relationships, etc. I think that's going to become important, Shabana.
Rajiv, can you answer the question on, is AI-based invention, is it patentable in India?
Yes, I think it is. Now that 3K has been released, hopefully AI is also possible.
That's what I want to end on. I mean, there's a quick story which I'll tell about Einstein. I don't know if you know about Einstein and his driver, but back in the 1930s, when Einstein used to go to all universities and give his lectures, he used to be escorted by his driver. His driver would attend and sit at the back of the hall. and watch Einstein give his lecture on quantum physics and relativity. And he would do this constantly and quite a few times. One of the days when they were driving to the next university, Einstein went and asked, the driver went and said, "I know your talk so very well. I learned it by heart. I bet I can give it better than you." So Einstein said, "All right, I'll take on the challenge. I'll swap over roles. I'll wear your hat and sit at the back of the hall. You give the lecture." Exactly. So when they went to the university, the driver went in the front, gave the talk. He gave a splendid presentation because he learned it all by heart. He knew it very well. And he was just going to walk out. And Einstein was quite proud and quite impressed. But then suddenly a professor, an eminent professor, stops and asks the driver a very complicated question. The driver tries to blabble out an answer, but unfortunately gets stuck, can't deal with it, and sort of mentions and tries to deal. Einstein starts to look embarrassed. At this point of time, the driver then suddenly says, what a simple question it is. My driver could even answer that question, and then passes it over for Einstein to answer. And I think one of the implications for that is where I see that humans have got that chance, that ability to be creative at that point on a sudden basis where AI has not managed to catch up yet. And I think it's that creativity and that connection and that ability to hear and listen, and that distinction between listening and hearing, which I think is going to make our ability as humans be very important in the future. But I think all our jobs, however skilled or whatever, there are going to be implications involved in this. So I'm just going to thank the panel for a very splendid interactive session, and I hope it's been useful to you. I know there's some more questions on there, and I think we're going to be available to try and answer some of those questions if you want to come and see us afterwards. But I know we'll run out of time. So I think that's the end.